Hey everyone, GameCube with Fries here, and today I'm going to be going over another collection video. This time I'm going to be taking a look at my original PlayStation collection, and this is going to be the first one that's going to be a little bit bigger. I actually do have a pretty decent amount of games for the PS1, so I figure I'll just jump right in. Metal Gear Solid, which is in a DVD case because this is not the original release. This came with the Essential Collection on PS2, and this is a really, really good game. I bought the Essential Collection, and that got me into the Metal Gear series, and this is definitely one of my favorite entries in the series. It doesn't feel over long. It has, I've always enjoyed the story in Metal Gear, even when it hits its more ridiculous patches later on. This is just really, really good stuff. I'm not a huge fan of stealth games, but Metal Gear Solid, in my opinion, got it right. Casper, which is probably one of the best licensed games I've ever played. This is like kind of a puzzle adventure game. You play from a top-down perspective, and you go around these different areas of the mansion, having to like solve puzzles, get keys to open other areas, figure out what certain switches do. As the game progresses, you'll get like these different forms you can change into. It's very interesting. It actually gets really complicated. It's easy to get turned around and forget what you're supposed to do, but never to the point where you're completely up against a wall and there's no way to solve anything. If you just keep exploring, you'll always find some kind of solution. The original Crash Bandicoot. I actually need to get a new copy because this copy does not work properly anymore. Yeah, but really good platformer. A bit more unforgiving than later Crash games. The save system isn't quite as convenient, and the levels are a bit longer, a bit on the harder side, but this definitely, it still holds up in terms of gameplay. It's just a bit more simplistic in terms of gameplay and a bit harder in terms of overall difficulty, but this is definitely worth playing if you're a fan of platformers. And Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, which is my personal favorite game in the series. It's just a huge leap forward in quality from the first game, and the first game was already really, really good. The save system's a lot more convenient. The levels are still challenging, but they don't quite hit the point of being a marathon like some of the later levels in Crash 1 were, at least the ones that I have played. It's just it feels a bit more well-rounded, and I think out of all of the Crash games, I think this is the one that really nails the formula. Although that's something that's pretty widely debated, actually. Crash Bandicoot Warped, which is the third game in the series. This is actually the first one I ever played, way back when. It plays just as well as 2, and a lot of people do consider this to be the best out of all the original games, and I mean, I kind of agree. The levels are really well designed. It has the most fluid gameplay. There's just a ton of different shit to do. There's more variety in the levels, but for me, this is kind of where I prefer 2, because it introduces a lot of levels that are devoted more on things like, there's biplane levels where you fly around and shoot down other planes and shoot down boxes. There's motorcycle racing levels. There's just all these different variations that they do add more to the game, but I feel like it kind of detracts from just the overall consistent feel that Crash 2 had. Still, really great game. Just I don't feel it's as quite as good as Crash 2. Crash Team Racing, which is a really nice kart racing game. Basically, Sony's answer to something like Mario Kart or Diddy Kong Racing. And I think it's just as good as, if not better than, the Mario Kart games, or at least the Mario Kart games of the time. Final Fantasy VII, which is the only PS1 Final Fantasy I own. I've played 8, and it sucks. I think from a gameplay standpoint, this is probably my favorite Final Fantasy. I really like the materia system and the way it works. It does, and like any other JRPG from this time period, or a lot of the other Final Fantasies, it does get a little bit tedious leveling up your party just because of how many people you acquire over the course of the game. But I thought the materia system was a lot of fun to play around with. It has a really great soundtrack and atmosphere. I don't really like the story that much. A lot of people are really crazy into the story. I don't think the story is one of this game's strong suits, but I do think from a gameplay standpoint, it's absolutely fantastic. Kingsfield, and this is actually developed by From Software, who some of you might know as the same people who developed Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, which are, my favorite games of all time. And in Japan, this was Kingsfield 2. We never got Kingsfield 1 over here, so this is technically, it's the second game ever made by From Software, but it's the first one to ever come out in the US. And it's a bit of a weird one. I can see how this is kind of a love it or hate it kind of game. I personally love it. It's a first-person dungeon crawler action RPG, and it's pre-analog control first-person, so you're basically kind of moving around. It has these kind of tanky D-pad controls. But just there's a lot of exploration involved. The whole world is basically this sort of labyrinth of passages leading through different areas. There's a lot of hidden walls and secrets to find. It's really open-ended for the time. Even from a technical standpoint, it's actually really impressive because even though the frame rate is a little inconsistent, there are no loading screens outside of the initial load screen when you start up the game. It just streams all of the data, and for 1995, that's really impressive. I'm definitely working on finishing this one. It just gets a little bit vague sometimes, but I highly recommend it, especially if you're already a fan of From Software, like I am. And we have Kingsfield 2, which was Kingsfield 3 in Japan, and I actually haven't played this yet because I want to finish the other Kingsfield games first. But I bought this in advance because I knew I was going to play it at some point. Mass Destruction, and this is kind of a weird little game. It's like a top-down action game where you play as a tank and you go and blow up other tanks and do different objectives like destroy an enemy base. It's kind of an arcadey action game. I used to play this a lot when I was a kid, and I just kind of picked it back up out of curiosity a couple years ago, and it's alright. It's there are definitely better action games out there, but, for $3, it's pretty good. The original Rayman, which was released on a variety of other platforms. I think it actually started out as an Atari Jaguar game. This game is hard. This is seriously probably the hardest platforming game I've ever played. It has a really nice soundtrack. The audio quality, especially for the time, is very crisp, and it has these very nice, vibrant, well-animated 2D graphics. This is the time period when it was mostly shifting over to 3D, and you weren't really seeing 2D games quite as much, but this is definitely a good game, but at the same time, I can only recommend it to the most hardcore of platforming game fans, because it's insanely hard. To this day, I can't beat this game. I just get frustrated and quit. Definitely not as polished as, some of the more recent ones like Origins. And Rayman 2, The Great Escape. And this was released on... They're still putting out versions of this game. This has come out on like every fucking platform under the sun. And this one's pretty good. I actually really like this. It's a lot easier than the first one, but at the same time, it almost gets a little too easy at certain points. I still enjoy it though. The level design is still creative. It just it has kind of that PS1 era charm to it. The sort of jaggy graphics, but they're very colorful, and the whole art design has kind of this weird dreamlike look to it. I can definitely say pick this up if you find it, or there are a lot of other versions out. Like I hear the Dreamcast version is like one of the best ones. Spider-Man. And this is, I haven't played this in a while. I should sit down and play it again. But this is kind of like a platforming action game, and it's really well done. It kind of, like, some of the levels are a bit on the bland side from what I can recall, and you can kind of breeze through a lot of it. But, I still enjoyed what I did play of it. I can't really say much. It's been way too long since I played this one. But I definitely remember enjoying what I did play of it. Here we go. We have the original Spyro, which is my single favorite platforming game of all time. I absolutely loved the old Spyro games. And I just... this is actually the first 3D platformer I ever played. A lot of people... a lot of people played Crash first, even though that's a lot less open-ended, more of a linear platformer. A lot of people grew up with Nintendo 64s and played Mario 64, but this is the one that I grew up with. And this is absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend that you pick this up. If you have a PS1 or if you have a PS3, get it off the PlayStation Store. I think it's like $8 or something like that. I don't remember how much it is, but it's worth it. Very, very, very good platformer. A lot of people, it kind of falls under that category people refer to as like a collectathon, and a lot of people really frown on that kind of platforming game, whereas, I don't know, I actually really enjoy them. I like going around these different environments and just kind of finding things and collecting things. And Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, which I really don't think is as strong of a game as the first one, but it's still really good. Like, they add in a lot of new stuff. Like, you'll go around and explore the levels, and there are these different, like, side missions and mini-games you can do. They just added a lot more in. I just don't think the level design, or even, I guess, the art direction, like how the levels look or what they're themed off of, is really as strong as the first game. But it definitely has better bosses, and mechanically it's a bit better. Like, they added in a few little touches that make it just a little bit easier to control. Not that the first one was hard to control. They just, like, there's like kind of a... they make it easier for you to, like, time your landings. If you, like, go and glide across the whole stage, you're not as likely to mess it up. They also made the flight stages a little better. And the last good Spyro game, the last one developed by Insomniac, Spyro Year of the Dragon, which I think is a lot better than the second game, but still not quite as good as the first. Like, I don't know. It kind of combines the superior mechanics of the second game with just generally the better art direction and level design of the first, and it also adds in, it continues adding in more new gameplay mechanics. It's very, like, there's a lot of variety to it. It just feels like there's tons of stuff you can do in this game. It's a lot of fun. Like, it really doesn't matter which one I think is the best or the worst or whatever. They're all really great games that I would highly recommend. We have the original Tomb Raider. which is definitely really clunky by today's standards, but still something I'd recommend you at least check out. Just give yourself some time to get used to the controls. The level design is a bit unforgiving. It's definitely a tough game. It's a very challenging game, but it's a good game too. Even if the controls feel, kind of stiff. This is probably, it's not really an adventure game because it's broken up into levels, but at the same time the levels are open-ended. But I guess action adventure. It's definitely one of the better action adventure games I've played, and it's pretty cheap too, because there were shitloads of copies floating around. And we have Tomb Raider 2, which I haven't finished yet. I'm not really liking it as much as Tomb Raider 1, largely because, I don't know, the levels feel a bit more linear, and it feels like it's leaning a bit more on the combat, but it really doesn't adjust the clunky controls at all to suit a more combat-focused game, so it winds up feeling like kind of a clunky mess sometimes. It's not horrible. I'm just really not enjoying it as much as I did the first one. It's still good, though. Just, I don't know. I would say play the first game first and then decide whether or not you want to bother with the sequels. And I also have Tomb Raider 3, which I haven't started yet. I'd like to finish 2 first one of these days. I hear this is like the hardest one out of the bunch, though. So we'll have to see when I get to that. Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, which I haven't started yet. I was kind of starting to work my way through the series, but then I kind of stopped. I was getting kind of burned out on 2. I just kind of picked these all up at once. And Tomb Raider Chronicles, which was the last PS1 era Tomb Raider. I believe Last Revelation and Chronicles also came out on the Dreamcast, if I'm not mistaken. Here, in this crappy blue jewel case, the original Twisted Metal, which is one of the first PS1 games I remember playing. Like, this and Tomb Raider are some of the earliest PS1 games I can remember. And this is like, it was labeled as a vehicular combat game. You choose from these different vehicles. They have different weapons mounted on them. You go around and collect power-ups, and basically the goal is to destroy all of the other vehicles on the map. And it's a lot of fun. This is a bit rough around the edges. It was the first in the series, and it came out in 1995, I think. But I think it still holds up fairly well today. And if you can find it for a decent price, I'd recommend you pick it up. Here we have Twisted Metal 2, which mechanically it plays a bit better than Twisted Metal 1. There's more variety with the vehicles and stages. It's a bit more difficult. It's been a while since I've played it, though, so I'd have to give it another try. I just remember this being a lot harder to get through than Twisted Metal 1, but at the same time, I feel like it is technically the better game. It's more well-made. Twisted Metal 3, and this is the point in the series where it was handed off to another development team, and it really shows with this one. This is very bizarre Twisted Metal, because it has a lot of the same characters, the levels are similar, but it feels different. Like, it feels a lot more wobbly and weird. Like, you can really tell that this was made by a completely different team. And some of the new characters, vehicles they added in just feel kind of odd. But it's not a bad game. It's just kind of weird. Like, it feels a little stiff. And I don't know. The licensed soundtrack kind of weirds me out too. Twisted Metal 1 and 2 had original soundtracks, but 3 and 4 added in licensed music. And speaking of, here's Twisted Metal 4, which was made by the same team that did 3, but I feel like they did a much better job than with this one. It feels like they really sort of nailed what they were trying to go with. The controls still feel kind of floaty. The physics feel a bit weird, but it feels generally better than 3. The levels are a little more interesting. Instead of having just a bunch of old redesigned versions of the old characters, it adds in completely new characters, some of which are actually kind of neat. It just feels like they really just had their own idea with this one and they went with it instead of just trying to make another Twisted Metal. And it's still, like, compared to 1 and 2, it's not that great, but it's definitely a lot better than 3. And I actually would recommend this, even if you didn't enjoy 3, give this one a chance, because it's actually not that bad. Alright, so that was my PS1 collection. One of the bigger collections I own. I really enjoy the PS1. I think it has a lot of unique games. It comes from kind of a period of time in video games where things were a little experimental. They had this new technology where they were kind of like branching out with new ideas, and we got a lot of really interesting games like Kingsfield, Twisted Metal, Tomb Raider. Just a lot of really, really good games were born out of this sort of experimentation that went on during this point. So I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time.